Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Signal Hour with Chris Martenson and Evie Martenson.
Hello, how are you? So good to be here.
This is going to be a ripper of a show, and the reason is we're going to have to go into the Epstein case a little bit, his so-called suicide. We're going to be examining that, and we're going to do it my way, which means we're going to look at data, evidence. I'm going to let you make up your own mind, but I will present this sort of as a prosecutor might. And I'm just going to lay it out because I believe in facts. I believe in data. And by the way, my superpower is I know BS when I hear it. So we're going to talk about that. Now, fair warning to anybody tuning in. There will be pictures of Epstein's dead body and things like that. So if that upsets you, tune out now because we're going to go in and
Yep. If
and
you're squeamish.
I'm not making this overly I'm really not going to make this overly graphic, but there's points that have to be made that can only be made by looking at the marks on the body.
Sure.
Okay.
That makes sense.
All right. So with that, we're going to dive into this, and it's going to look like this. There. Okay. I'm leading the witness now.
Uh-oh, you are. Epstein didn't kill himself, really?
Right. So all of this started with, we're going to discuss this astonishing interview that came out with Maria Bartiromo, and you had Kash Patel and Dan Bongino. There they are. And it just struck a lot of people as maybe it looked a little guilty-ish. And I just put this tweet out. My PhD from Duke University is in pathology / toxicology, my specialty. And I performed autopsies. So I'm comfortable with the topics of what science can and can't do in forensically. And this just struck me as that we had a huge problem right away because Patel said, a suicide when you see one, and that's what that was, referring to Epstein. And Bongino said he killed himself. I've seen the whole file. He killed himself. So we're going to look at that. Now, Evie, this is Phillips Truth responded to that particular tweet of mine.
Oh, yeah.
And he came up with this list of 8 sort of anomalies. There's some anomalies surrounding his suicide, but actually there's more than 8. We'll come up to them, but I wonder if you want to just take us through these.
So according to Philip, the anomalies surrounding Epstein hanging himself are just part of the story. Too many things really don't add up. Number 1, Epstein was found hanging in his cell despite being on suicide watch just weeks earlier and supposed to be under close observation. 2, Epstein's cellmate was transferred out the morning of his death, leaving Epstein alone, and prison staff failed to check on him every 30 minutes as required and then lied about it. 3, malfunctioning or missing security camera footage around Epstein's cell at the time of death. 4, both guards had fallen asleep at the time of the suicide. 5, the fracture of Epstein's hyoid bone, which some experts say is more consistent with strangulation than hanging, exactly as the OP, which is you, states. 6, the noose used to hang Epstein reportedly had no blood stains despite visible neck lacerations. 7, Epstein had access to other means of self-harm, for example, the CPAP machine cord, but allegedly used a less efficient method. 8, the death scene was disturbed immediately by prison staff and the cell was likely cleaned and reused, destroying potential evidence. So make up your own mind, but these are the facts.
Okay, that's kind of a troubling fact pattern. So I want to take this from a detective standpoint and then maybe a prosecutor standpoint. So let's build this case carefully, right? Okay. Because this is just what everybody is. I think this is what we're all due in a situation like this. Like what is the actual evidence and does it comport? Because as we know, when you have something, just even one piece of evidence that violates the so-called official narrative or the story that's being run with, whether that's a defense, a prosecutor, or the government making the case like, that there was this one bullet that killed JFK, but it took magic turns and shattered a leg and fell out on a gurney like completely unmolested, like that bullet.
Right.
That one piece of data alone says, okay, that's not how the JFK assassination happened. That magic bullet is a stupid theory on its face, but also forensically. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do then. What I want to do is I'll take this one. So let's just go through the death, make sure we all share common ground around this. So what happened? Okay, so this is the first moment of Jeffrey Epstein's discovery in the jail cell, 6:30 a.m. promptly, August 10th, 2019. He's found unresponsive in his cell in the Special Housing Unit, the SHU, the MCC, Metropolitan Correctional Center, by guards Tova Noel and Michael Thomas, the two who fell asleep, distributing breakfast shortly after 6:30 a.m. He was in a kneeling position, they say here. This is in Wiki. I'm sorry, Grok dug this one up for me here. And this is according to Wiki and CBS News. He's found in a kneeling position with a strip of bedsheet wrapped around his neck, tied to the top bunk, and heart was stopped. Immediate response. They cut him down, okay, from the noose and attempted CPR. Emergency responders called. He's whisked away to New York Downtown Hospital. Somehow he's pronounced dead at 6:39. So finding him shortly after 6:30 and being pronounced dead at 6:39 is quite the trick, even in New York City, I would imagine.
Yeah.
And scene details, Epstein was alone in his cell. His cellmate had been transferred out the previous day, and no replacement was assigned, against protocol. The guards had not checked on him for about 8 hours, also against protocol. Having fallen asleep, against protocol. Falsified records, very much against protocol. 2 cameras outside his cell malfunctioned. Another had unusable footage.
Of course it did.
So those are just some sort of the facts around it. We've heard some of them before, but I want to build that up. As well, there are a few other troubling facts that Fagier came up with here.
Yep.
So look at this.
First one, he says Epstein was found in a fetal position with a mark around his neck 18 days prior, and claims he was attacked by his cellmate, who was a muscle-bound ex-cop who murdered 4 people, one via strangulation. And then the prison officials claimed it was a suicide attempt, but the video was lost due to a technical error. Then Epstein gets transferred to a new cell and is placed on suicide watch.
Okay, now hold up right there, because we just got to go into this. So at 1:27 in the morning, okay, on July 23rd, 2019, Epstein is found semi-conscious in his cell with injuries to his neck. But let's go here. Yeah, go ahead and read that.
Okay. Epstein, 66, was found semi-conscious with marks on his neck in his cell at the Metropolitan Correctional Center in Manhattan. Sometime in the last 2 days, the sources said. Epstein is on suicide watch, 2 sources said. While the 2 sources said that Epstein may have tried to hang himself, a 3rd source cautioned that the injuries weren't serious, questioning whether Epstein might have staged an attack or a suicide attempt to get it transferred to another facility.
So this is July 23rd, and of course he's killed a couple months later, or he dies under mysterious circumstances a couple months later. But this is important context. So he's found in a cell. He's in a cell with this muscle-bound ex-cop, right? And they find him at 1:27 in the morning, right? And he's in a fetal position, semi-conscious, marks around his neck. So first thing is like, how did those marks get around his neck? What did he try to hang himself with? There's like details that would normally accompany like an actual investigation. Second thing we're going to note here is it was sources. Sources said sources. No names, right? So who are these sources? Are they prisoners? Are they jail guards? Are they DOJ people? Are they shadowy CIA folks? Who
are they? Just journalists who are opining? Yeah, it'd be good to know.
Who are these people? But this is where it gets really interesting. Look what the sources said about his cellmate, Tartaglione.
Sources said Tartaglione claimed not to have seen anything and not to have touched Epstein.
I didn't see nothing. These prison cells are even smaller than our studio. Like, I didn't see anything. There was enough of a ruckus for guards to come running to find Epstein, who says this guy just tried to kill me.
Right.
Who's a muscle-bound ex-cop who's in prison for killing 4 people, one of whom he strangled, right? They come running. They open up the thing. There he is in a fetal position, marks on his neck. And this guy's like, I didn't see nothing. By the way, there's a pic of this guy.
Oh, shoot. He's ripped. Okay.
With German Shepherds. I mean, I'm getting a vibe off this guy, okay?
Yep.
All right, so we're going to turn now to this, which is the official DOJ report that came out in June of 23. This is under the Biden administration. Make of that what you will, and their DOJ.
Right.
This is investigation review of the Federal Bureau, about Jeffrey Epstein. So here's again, we're just setting the stage for the finding of the body so that we can all share in the few pictures that we do have to sort of analyze them, see what conclusions we come to.
Sure.
All right. So So this is what happened.
All right. On August 10th at approximately 6:30 a.m., the two SHU staff on duty, Tova Noel and material handler Michael Thomas, began delivering breakfast to SHU inmates. Noel unlocked the door to Epstein's tier. When Thomas attempted to deliver breakfast to Epstein through the food slot in his locked door, Epstein did not respond to Thomas's verbal commands. Thomas unlocked the cell door and saw Epstein hanged.
Okay.
Thomas immediately yelled for Noel to get help and call for a medical emergency.
All right. So here's the deal. This is really important because we just heard from Grok. It was reported that he was in a kneeling position. He was cut down. But now this is the official DOJ report. So there's some changes here. And I think it's important that we get these locked in our mind. I'm going to take this as the official declaration besides unnamed sources reported by CBS. So here's what we have. It says Thomas told the Office of the Inspector General, the OIG, that when he entered Epstein's cell, Epstein had an orange string, presumably from a sheet or a shirt, around his neck that was tied to the top portion of the bunk bed that was in his room. Epstein was suspended from the top bunk in a near seated position, okay, with his buttocks approximately 1 to 1.5 inches off the floor. Thomas said he immediately ripped the orange string from the bunk bed and Epstein's buttocks dropped to the ground. Okay. And then he was lowered further. So this is saying he's suspended, right? And I pulled my earpiece out. This says he's suspended with his buttocks just a little off the floor. So he's hanging. He has to be hanging. This is gravity. He now has to be hanging in a near vertical position because it's impossible for your buttocks to hit the floor without your legs being in front of you.
That's true.
The way this is written. So we have to take this as truth because I'm going to guess this has to be
forward and his feet would be touching the ground a little.
His feet would be on the ground in front of him. But for you to rip the string and have the buttocks hit the ground, I assume you have to be in this sort of a position, head here.
Yeah.
Feet way out here.
Yeah.
And, okay. Does that make sense? So here's what we got. He was suspended. So he's hanging from this. So that again means that gravity is at work and he's going to be suspended. So it's going to be pulling almost straight up on his head.
Right under his jaw. I think.
Yeah. It's going to be a classic ligature mark. It's going to come up like this. It's going to be pulling up here. Okay. 2, his buttocks dropped, which means his legs must have been out front, not kneeling as described before, but we don't know. So, and this is something we ought to know, the basics of the scene.
Yeah.
Just the basics.
I wish we had a picture. We don't, do we?
There are no pictures.
How did they not take a picture of the scene?
How did they not? How did the steel all get recycled immediately? These questions need to be known. Ripped the orange string, so not cut. So we heard before kneeling, cut. Now we're hearing seated position, suspended, and ripped.
Right.
Okay. Anyway, conclusion, that ligature mark, any ligature mark should have been high and tight under his chin, angled steeply upwards because he's suspended.
Right. Yep.
There's no way to have your legs out front and be leaning forward and have your buttocks suspended off the ground. There's just no way to pull that off physically.
Not really.
No. All right. So here's the detective's path we're going to follow. Suicide or homicide? Which was it? Okay. And first thing we have to ask and answer is, does the physical evidence, does it actually match the wounds? Okay, that's question 1. Question 2 is going to be, are there any misfitting pieces of evidence? Are there defensive wounds? Is there something about the shape of the body, the position of the body? Was it physically even possible for the alleged piece of thing that was suspending him to hold his weight?
Right. What was that
material? And are there any other surrounding events that might cause us to take a closer look? So an example of that would be, detective comes, wife is lying dead at the bottom of the stairs. Husband says, I guess she fell. But then he finds out from the neighbors that the day before there was violent yelling and shouting and
massive fighting
over something, or that the
previous incidences of violence or something.
All the ring cameras in the home were mysteriously not functioning that day. Whatever.
They would jump right down your throat if that was the case. If you were just a little person.
Yes.
You would be guilty just because.
All right. So the first thing we're going to do then is we're going to listen up here. This is a pretty good 60 minutes interview with Michael Baden, who is probably one of the world's top forensic pathologists. He's conducted 20,000 investigations, inquiries into deaths. He was the chief ME at New York City. This guy has been around the block a lot. He had some immediate questions early on.
The reason Dr. Baden thinks Jeffrey Epstein's death might be a homicide is because of the unusual fractures he saw in Epstein's neck.
There were fractures of the left, the right thyroid cartilage, and the left hyoid bone.
This is an autopsy photo of Epstein's broken hyoid bone, a U-shaped bone that sits under the jaw that part of the tongue attaches to. The thyroid cartilage sits at the front of the neck.
I have never seen 3 fractures like this in a suicidal hanging. Sometimes there's a fracture of the hyoid bone or a fracture of the thyroid cartilage.
But not 3.
Very unusual to have 2 and not 3. And going over 1,000 jail hangings, suicides in the New York City state prisons over the past 40, 50 years, no one had 3 fractures.
The New York City Medical Examiner's Office.
Okay, let's start there. Over 1,000.
That's a lot.
Jail hangings. Nobody ever had 3 fractures. So we're going to go into those fractures in detail so people know exactly what we're talking about. We got some anatomy here. We got a hyoid bone. We got some thyroid cartilage. Sometimes accidentally called a bone by the media, but the thyroid cartilage is your Adam's apple.
Yeah, I was about to ask.
Yeah,
Adam's apple. It's more prominent in men.
Yes, but women have it too, but it's cartilage. It's not a bone.
Mm-hmm.
Fun fact: the hyoid bone is a bone, and it is the only bone in your entire body which is not otherwise connected to another bone through some sort of structure. It's just floating around out there.
Like no ligaments or anything else.
Yeah, it's just it's suspended
it's like
in there.
Your patella on your knee.
Not a bone, but yes.
True.
All right. So never happened before.
Disputes Baden's theory, saying that fractures of the hyoid bone and cartilage can be seen in suicides and homicides, and they stand firmly behind their finding of suicide by hanging.
So it can be seen in suicides, but, well, I'll show you more data on that in just a second. It needs to be pointed out that it's never ever seen in the context of hanging with a bed sheet. So it's possible. So they're sort of lumping them. They're like, oh, when people hang themselves, it's like as if that's a singular thing. Some people sit up on a tree branch and heave themselves off the branch.
Right.
Some people kick a stool out and have a jolt. Right.
Or if you have like a wire, like if you use a cord,
or
that's going to do something different than if you use a cloth.
Exactly.
Right?
So it's totally stupid to say, oh, well, because we see these in hangings, therefore it's totally possible here. It doesn't consider the totality of the circumstance. What was actually used and what does that mean?
Then there's the 2 nooses. This was the one that was sketched and included in the autopsy by the medical examiner.
Nice sketch.
Presumably because they thought it was used in Epstein's death.
Okay. Just for kicks though, see that says 34.25 inches on this long tail out here? 38.25 inches.
Yeah.
38. That's important because we have to consider like how was there enough rope? Because remember, he's supposed to have been hung off the top bunk.
Right.
Plus his buttocks is only an inch off the floor. So now we get a sense of how long that the lead on this, like there's the noose itself, but then there's the lead.
Right.
Is 38 inches enough to pull that off? That would be one question. And do we see marks on that would be consistent with it having been tied and weighted by a 198-pound man?
But Dr. Baden says that noose and the wounds on Jeffrey Epstein's neck don't appear to match.
What do you see when you see these 2 things together?
What I see here is that this noose doesn't match the ligature furrow mark. Nope. It's wider than this.
To the naked eye, it looks like there's some blood here, and it doesn't look like there's any blood on this noose.
That's right. This looks like a clean noose that was never used to compress anybody's neck.
There's also something that's striking about the photos. The wound is down here. You'd think if somebody hung themselves, the wound would be maybe up here.
Yes. Most hangings, especially free hangings, the ligature slides up to beneath the jawbone, the mandible. Here it's in the middle of the neck.
Dr. Baden says a wound straight across the neck is more common when a victim is strangled by a wire.
Mhm.
Correct. So that this is all true.
So he was garroted.
We'll get there.
Potentially.
Potentially.
I'm sorry.
Don't lead the witnesses. So the jury. So, but it's starting to accumulate here. There's already some very obvious questions, right? And the first thing I want to set up is that why is it up to the New York medical examiner to declare if it was a suicide or not? This is normally the province of a detective. At no point did they consult with and say, oh, but the detective, the lead investigator has determined it was a suicide, right? All a medical examiner can determine is that the wounds are consistent or inconsistent with something, cause of death.
Right.
That's it.
But they don't decide the cause of death typically.
They wouldn't. No, I mean, they can. And lazy police work is like, oh, well, that they said it was a suicide, right? Like that Clinton associate who was found strangled, but also with a shotgun wound in the middle of the chest.
Yeah.
They declared that a suicide, case closed. So, at any rate, I'm not too impressed with this. So let's dive in on this tiny bit. So here's what we see. This is the wounds across his neck. First off, this is his hyoid that's fairly crushed right here. And you can see a lot of bruising around this. The second thing is you can see there's a very consistent thickness of whatever this was. The ligature left a mark. It looks to me like it's flat-ish, potentially, and about, I don't know, 1/4 inch across. And the second thing we're going to notice is that there's a lot of wounding around the right side of his neck, and there's almost none around the left side of his neck, the left side from his standpoint.
Yep.
And the third thing we're going to notice is there's actually 2 wound paths, this one and this one. So this is one single path. So you can imagine one possible mode of action here was something was garroted around his neck, like a wire of some kind was pulled by somebody, and they were pulling harder to the right. And at first they had one pull on it, and then it got shifted. And then you had a second pull on it that shifted the cord from here going this way to a little bit higher coming around this way. Well, it would have stayed firmly anchored right here. So this is highly consistent. So a lot of people said, oh, he really wanted to kill himself, so he threw himself onto that. That's why it looks so violent like that. He threw himself onto it, right? Like twice.
Because he messed up the first time.
But also only to the right side.
Yeah, that is kind of interesting.
And this is supposed to have been
there was a left injury to the left part of the hyoid too, right?
Well, both sides of the hyoid were crushed out.
Oh, okay.
Right, both sides. So it was broken both sides. We'll look at that in a minute. But you're jumping ahead.
Oh, sorry.
Just trying to build the case here.
I'm sorry.
Squirrel. It's easy.
No, my brain is.
I know. You're thinking normally. It's good, but so here he is, and it's very clear that this is strong violence that happened here, right?
Yeah, you can see that.
And I remember what I was going to say, which is also that the bed sheets are prison bed sheets. They're specifically designed to tear and not hold weight, so they can't be used for suicide, particularly in a cell where you're on suicide watch
or violence, probably between inmates, maybe.
Sure, all of that. But if you were going to try and take a bed sheet and make it into something, if it was like tissue paper, but you wanted to turn it into something you could hang yourself, you and I both know how to make cordage out of grass, or even, I bet I could even make toilet paper strong enough to hang myself with if I was careful with it, right? Because you twist it and you twist it. But if you had that, if you had twisted this up, and what they showed in that, and we'll get back to the noose again, the alleged noose that they said, oh, this must have been it. That wasn't twisted at all. That was just all one flat piece.
Yeah, it's true.
It wasn't carefully what we would call corded.
No, it wasn't corded. It wasn't.
Now, if you hang yourself with something that's corded or twisted, and they found him dead, so that means that you had a circulating heart, circulation was going, heart's pumping, you start hanging yourself, your heart stops. Now you are no longer filling your vessels up with blood anymore. And what happens then is the skin tends to set a pattern around whatever it was that was there, particularly if you're hanging on it and an hour or two has passed and you're just like, oh, right? We would see if he had used a twisted thing, we would see the marks of that in his neck very clearly at this point.
it would look
It would leave an
different than
imprint.
it does. It would be, yeah.
Right? We don't see an imprint of a big, fat, wide, orangey thing that they tried to show us. But I'm going to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that can't have been it.
Reason, Doc.
Okay. So let's come forward. Vigilant Fox put this clip up. This is the one I watched. I love everything Vigilant Fox does here. But let's listen in now to Cash and Dan.
You said Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide. People don't believe it.
Well, I mean, listen, they have a right to their opinion, but as someone who has worked as a public defender, as a prosecutor, who's been in that prison system, who's been in the Metropolitan Detention Center, who's been in segregated housing, you know a suicide when you see one, and that's what that was.
Okay, I'm going to start there. So how does being a public defender sort of bolster your case for here are my bona fides? Dude, I was a public defender. I was a public defender. You know a suicide when you see one, right? I would think anybody who's been in the legal system for any time at all understands that faking suicides is one of the more common ways people try to evade being caught committing murder or homicide.
Or they just unalive somebody because that person's going to testify in a way they don't like. There's a whole, I mean, people get into the prison system too. Like, there's a whole economy in there where you can get all sorts of stuff, right?
Yeah. Oh, God. You guys
it's like, it's not impossible to think that something like that could happen.
People buy hits in prison systems all the time, at least if the TV I watch is accurate. Might not be, but I'm pretty sure it is. So, and the second thing is that the actual correct statement from somebody who's in law enforcement is, when you encounter what looks to be a suicide, you have to very carefully rule out that it wasn't staged, because that is a common thing that people do. I can tell you that from my experience as somebody who's been in the prison system, who's been a public defender, who's been around law enforcement. That is the only accurate statement you can say. Not because I was a public defender, you know a suicide when you see one. That just, my bells went off right away.
Yeah.
I was like,
You look a little wide-eyed and scared.
Well, and then it gets even more awkward.
He killed himself. You want me to? I've seen the whole file. He killed himself.
I know it's hard work.
I've seen the file. Well, then please share that file with us.
Can we talk about it?
Because here's the thing. This is just another version of trust me, bro. Look, whether we want to put higher or lower levels of trust around Cash and Dan compared to the prior administration or any prior administration, the whole point of them coming in was supposed to be higher transparency, and they lead with trust me, bro. Not a good look as far as I'm concerned. Yeah.
I would agree.
So that was that. All right. Now here's the thing. A normal ligature hanging mark would be like this. It comes up very rapidly under the chin. Yeah. Oh,
yeah. There you go.
There we go. Under here. But Epstein's ligature mark is actually cutting straight across his neck. This is the path of travel of how Epstein allegedly hung himself. So how many ways can we imagine getting that mark, the Epstein ligature marks, I should say, because as we've already established, there's actually at least two, possibly three. This might be a third departure here, but there's at least two main ligature marks going this way and that way, with obviously the crushed larynx here, the thyroid bone, the cartilage. And so those travel literally this way. So how could you hang yourself? You'd have to be like
skydiving,
like whatever the force is, like maybe. So if you tie it to like something, you would have to be leaning straight away from it.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? You would have to, if it's tied here, you would have to lean straight away with enough force to both crush your thyroid, right? Like that's a crush right there. And the fact that we see this bruising and everything all around it says that was crushed while that bruising happens during life, because once the heart stops pumping, you don't typically see that. It doesn't set up like that afterwards, right?
That's called petechiae, right?
Well, the petechiae are all these little red eruptions around here. And by the way, he has petechiae in the eyes, which is entirely consistent with strangulation, not hanging. Hanging, you get petechiae in the mouth and down here and stuff, but he had petechiae in his eyes, which are little ruptured capillaries. But
yeah.
So leaving that aside for a second, we'll get back to that. How can we account for this ligature mark like this when we know that they said, oh, we found him, his buttocks was suspended off the floor, we ripped it and he fell straight to the ground, he's hanging. So how would you, with your feet out straight, have managed to apply pressure so that you've put a ligature
So that
mark
it's way down here instead of higher.
that goes straight back? How do you do that? How do you create a straight ligature mark around your neck?
I don't know. Maybe we should see what the comments are saying.
Well, yeah.
Skinny says if your butt is dangling an inch from the floor, wouldn't your instinct just be to put your feet down?
Yeah, yeah, unless, the point was to kill yourself.
So you're really trying hard.
Oh.
Show us his eyes.
Well, I'll tell you what, I need a lot of autopsy photos that we did not get. I tried hard to find the autopsy itself, and I couldn't get the whole report. It's just not available. Somehow 60 Minutes got their hands on a bunch of photos, but I can't, so I have to use, yeah.
Fluorescent soapy.
And I agree with this.
Bongino's face said it all. He was lying. He's so compromised, and that's a short list on who silenced him. He definitely didn't seem like he was acting like himself.
Yep.
Yeah.
And by the way, sorry, showed that one. I wanted to get this one. This is what I thought.
Yeah.
I thought somebody roofied these two.
The security guards, because they were conveniently sleeping. And didn't something weird happen to them after the fact too? Like,
I didn't chase that down.
Suicide or something weird.
I didn't chase that down.
Something about it.
All right. So here from the side, we can see even more clearly now, Evie, just how violently this is. It's not like I'm sort of making it up that maybe this was like not headed this way, right? This is right up under the jawline. Would be a standard hanging right here.
Right. It would curve.
And it would also be higher up here typically, right?
Yep.
This is straight on top of the Adam's apple, and it comes ripping straight around the side, then was repositioned and came up this way.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about this one still. I don't know if that's dried blood or, again, I'd have to have access to higher quality photos.
Yep. That's definitely
and then
weird.
Here you can see all these petechiae up here. And as well, you might also notice, this is going to be important later. Do you see this? This is lividity right here. You see how reddish this ear looks?
Yeah.
That would be consistent actually with being on your side when you died, when your heart stopped pumping.
Oh, really?
Because the blood settles pretty rapidly, over the next X amount of time after you die, it settles. And that's going to be important later. Now, we have one more thing we got to talk about here, which is, hold on, there's not just these marks we talked about, but there's these up here. There's a lot, there's this. These are pretty significant wounds up here, all right? Contusions of some kind. And as we're going to see, those are actually consistent. Remember now, there were three fractures they talked about, 2 in the Adam's apple on each side, and they were broken out. So that's consistent with being crushed in. Okay. That, or you could be garroted or strangled or whatever, but yep, crushed out. And then there's the hyoid bone, which comes all the way up, and I'll show everybody pictures, but it was broken up here on the left side, up high, which is consistent with those 2 green arrows. This is exactly where that fracture would have happened of the hyoid bone, because it's way higher. This is the thyroid way down here. The hyoid bone is way up. It's way up under here.
How would you fracture that? Just getting hit there?
A lot of ways you could get hit. It's possible if you had put enough just pressure on it, so you could hang yourself, but you need, again, like you mentioned before, a rope or a wire, something that's providing a lot of very concentrated force.
Right. But it's interesting that it's broken up there, but there's only the one like little kind of mark.
It could have been struck. A striking force could have done that. But again, just to start settling this out, we have here, this is your thyroid cartilage. Your Adam's apple is here. And then the hyoid bone is this piece. And up here is the right version, and here's the left. It would be way up under the jawbone on this other side. And looking at it again with some basic schematics here, the hyoid bone is found much higher. So if you went from if you feel this, your Adam's apple, go up even higher, and you can just feel that the front prominence is way up there.
Oh yeah, a couple fingers from your.
Yeah, it's up there. And that would be this part of it. And then it has these 2 horns that come up. The hyoid bone looks like a big U, right? And it was this part, this greater horn on this side right here, that was broken. And this is what it looks like when it was broken. And I said, I think it's been broken into 3 pieces, and let me tell you why. I think they're missing a piece here. First off, a couple of very subtle things. They've tilted this slightly, so the 2 horns match a tiny bit. But if you look at this, you can kind of see they didn't have this rotated exactly right. Hey, you just throw this down on the autopsy table, fine. But this has been taken out of the body, cleaned, macerated. It's been cleaned off so that we're looking at like a wishbone or something.
Mm-hmm.
And here's why I think a piece is missing is because when you try and line up these top and bottom pieces, you can see there's this little horn in the back.
Mm-hmm.
We are looking here. This is as if you were looking at it from the front of the body. Like if you were looking at mine, that's what it would look like from the front. We could also look at it from the back, from the posterior position. So this is the anterior position. So we're looking at it from the front. Okay. From the front, we see that there's a piece back here that snapped off, which would be consistent for me with being broken. This, like if you imagine snapping a wishbone,
Mm-hmm.
to break this way with a piece sticking off, I would
In
imagine
the back.
it's like snapping this way. Like
Yeah.
we've pushed it in,
That makes sense.
but just to guess. This is the side that was unbroken, and you see I've drawn some dotted lines here.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And here I've drawn the same dotted lines on this piece, and you can just see there's a little gap here, almost as if there's a little, maybe we would need another piece to make sense of this.
Right. Or maybe a piece
It's
came
possible.
off somewhere.
It's possible, but again, maybe it's rotated funny, because you could see maybe this piece needs to be actually stood up a little bit, like needs to be rotated, and therefore we're looking at a fatter aspect of it,
Mm-hmm.
right? So
Yeah.
I can't tell. Again, please give me sufficient photos. Here, somehow 60 Minutes came up with a picture from the backside. So this is the posterior view.
Mm.
So we're looking at it from totally the other way. And now I think we can begin to see a little bit more clear. So first up, I had to rotate this image to make it flat again.
Okay.
And now these 2 horns are the same length. And again, it shows that now it's easier to appreciate that potentially there's a missing piece in here.
Yeah. You can see that.
Yeah. And same story. We start drawing some lines on here, and we just see that it just doesn't line up.
No.
It's just a little off. But again, it could be a rotational problem. Don't know. We just don't have high enough quality photos to look at it.
Right.
But at least it's broken into 2 pieces, right?
It would be nice if whatever they put it on when they photographed it had like little millimeter, like a little measurement scale. You know how they do sometimes?
I'm sure they might have had it on this one. I had to grab what I could.
Yeah.
And again, I'm annoyed that I have to deal with all the 60 Minutes watermarks and that they got access to these photos, but nobody else can.
You're not authorized.
Yeah. All right. So carrying on again, the hyoid bone way over, way up here under compared to this.
Mhm.
So again, notice this is the horn that was broken off, that little piece right there.
Yep.
And that does line up with that.
Yep.
So now we have to account in our official story, how do we have one set of marks and they are a set of marks? Because we've already established that there's at least 2, but possibly a third, but that could be blood. Again, if that is blood, raises the question, why is there no blood found on the sheets that allegedly hanged him? Good
Mhm.
question. But we have at least 2 ligature marks coming around the side here on the right side. Okay. How do you to be complete, you have to explain this. What accounts for that enough violence?
Mhm.
And there's no other, you'll notice here, Evie, there's no other marks connecting them. It's not like the noose suddenly slipped up there or something. So we would
Right.
have these abrasions it's just all by itself, a wound there that we might imagine was a striking blow, or maybe he fell earlier in the day and hit his thing on the side of the table.
Right.
You have to account for it though.
You do. Right. And maybe, you know how he had that issue that happened with the cop that was in there with him previously? Would any of those injuries, I'm sure they ruled that out, but would any of whatever happened from that altercation have still been present? Like, could he have broken his hyoid then and they wouldn't have known it? Like, I don't know. I'm just curious.
It's possible, but if that was 2 weeks earlier, you probably would have seen reactive tissue around it.
Mm,
And this wouldn't have been a fresh abrasion. That's a fresh contusion right there.
yeah.
It would have been a bruise by that point in time. It
Okay.
would have settled in, it would have gotten purpley yellowish something.
Yeah.
That's
green.
fresh. I would place that consistent with the time of these other marks that I see on here.
Yep. That makes sense.
Yeah, same sort of degree of redness to this as to this.
Mm-hmm. It's weird because I can see like it looks like popped blood vessels. You could imagine that that's blood could have come out of there, but also not. You know, when you have like when you have a blood blister under your skin, it can look really dark and reddish, almost as if the blood's at the surface, but it's not.
Yeah.
And the neck tissue, I know, is sensitive that way.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is fairly crushed though. His hyoid was broken, but his thyroid bone cartilage was just crushed. And this is what it looks like. These are, well, I wish I could get actual x-rays of everything and all of that. But anyway, so this is one side, this is the left side crushed out and the right side crushed out. And these are fairly crushed. You'll notice like, this isn't just sort of like, there's a lot of fragments in there. His Adam's apple got well and truly crushed, which does make sense, right? Look at that. So that's a lot of force. And the first question I would be asking as a investigator is, can I develop that much force slump hanging on a prison sheet hanging thing? Because again, they're designed to tear. So the first question would be, how much force can you apply? How much force is required to create that level of traumatic injury? And is it even possible with a non-twisted, a non-corded bed sheet? Can you do that, or does it tear?
What was the name of that scientific show they used to like test out things like this on?
Ooh, CSI.
No, it was something else. I can't remember the name of it.
We all loved CSI because they would find like one little hair under the dog's bed that would like disprove the whole case. And we loved that, all of us, because it made the world was rational and made sense and evidence mattered. You know, here they're like, the FBI is hosing down the stands, you know, the roof of the roof of July 13th, and all the steel is magically recycled before anybody can look at it. And they whisk him out and don't take any photos of the crime scene until after the body has been moved and everything's gone, if we call it a crime scene.
No, I'm thinking of a show that used to, y'all in the comments, Mythbusters. Thank you. Yes. Thank you.
Mythbusters. Okay. Thanks, Rick. All right. We see that there now. So again, there's that hyoid bone. It's way over there. It's way over there. So I had to do some digging around, and we heard Michael Baden say, in 1,000 prison hangings, you've never seen all three of these bones broken. So, okay. Steve Steinbeck here is saying, well, out of 48 examined cases, right, of hangings, the hyoid bone only broke when a nylon line was used, never if a bed sheet or cheesecloth. Who hangs themselves with cheesecloth? Well, somebody did. And so here we can see, here's 48. 14 times the hyoid bone was fractured. 16 times the thyroid cartilage was fractured. 18 times no fractures. So no fracturing is actually more common than either of these other two. Okay. And pretty much 100% of the time the hyoid fractured, it was because they used a nylon line, right? Or a belt or an electric cable, which makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Bed sheet, 0. And the thyroid, 0, right? So it doesn't happen.
Or cheesecloth, supposedly. I guess you could thyroid cartilage fracture from that.
All right, so there was one. I got one sheet of the autopsy report, the cover page. Okay, that's all we got out of New York Medical Examiner. So the final diagnosis was a ligature furrow of the neck. Saw that, or furrows, I should say, because there's clearly two. That's obvious. Petechial hemorrhages of bilateral, palpebral, conjunctivae, and oral mucosa. Confluent hemorrhages of the right bulbar. Okay, so his eyes, a plethora of face and head with petechial hemorrhages of face. And then in green, we see the fractures of the thyroid cartilage, corneae, the two wings of it on the side, and also the cornea of the left hyoid, with accompanying soft tissue hemorrhages. And I hope they talked about that. But Evie, what do you see down there in red?
Abrasions of left forearm, cutaneous contusions of wrists, and subcutaneous hemorrhage of left deltoid muscle. Where did that come from?
What about these abrasions and contusions? What about those?
And it also says see anthropology report. What the heck is that about?
I have no idea. I have no idea, but
It's weird.
At any rate, this is bizarre to me that they just drop them down. There's all these abrasions and hemorrhage and other things, and then that's the end of that. As far as I know. All right.
Strange.
That's all we have though to work on. So let's go now to the Epstein crime scene first. This is the door to his cell. That's what it would have looked like. There's a window that you can peer into. Again, he's supposed to be in a special unit, the SHU, for suicide watch. Weirdly, I would think, and I'm no expert at this, Evie, but I would think that if you wanted to have somebody in suicide watch, you would have him in a room without a corner on it.
Yeah, you would think so. Is that his room? What a mess.
Because the door is over here, but there's a corner. Like, how do you put somebody in a room
when
for suicide watch?
The whole thing.
It has a corner in it. But this is allegedly the room as they found it. This is a photo after who knows what's been moved, who knows what state everything was in,
right?
Who knows what's been added or subtracted, but we're supposed to believe like this is something that represents. Anyway, he had a lot of extra bedding.
Yeah, he did.
That's a lot. Normally they give you one of each of those things. They showed this hanging here from the lower right side of the lower bunk, just I guess that thing. But I think you can clearly see that this is torn.
Yeah. And
this end isn't connected to anything. So I'm not clear what this was. That's not tied to the upper bunk. This is, I would say that's tied to a post. Right. So again, the only distinction we have is, definition we have was it's coming from an upper bunk. This was found over by here. Let me show you where this is found. This is found in that earlier photo. You see there's this desk here with probably a swing out stool, and here's the potty, right? You can see that hanging, and there's these white bars. So this is found in the floor over there. And I want to notice here that looks torn to me.
Mm-hmm.
That looks torn.
Yep. That
looks torn. That possibly looks cut.
Oh, that end.
Yeah. Huh. And if the guard did tear him down with an orange string, this would actually be the thing I would be focused on, because I can tell you it's got not one but two knots that have been weighted. So this is a possibility for something that could have been. But there shouldn't be any question about which was the noose that you found around his neck.
Are they confused about this?
Well, this isn't the one they drew.
You're right.
I'll show you a picture of that one in a minute. This is not the one they drew, but if I was going to guess, I would say, okay, it looks weighted, it's smaller. Like this would be but again, they didn't go with that one. So how do you make that basic of an error? Like, oh, we forgot. We just didn't notice which was the actual noose.
Oops, it was the wrong one.
Oops, it was the wrong one. Right?
If it had been that one though, would those knots have shown up? Or not necessarily. Depends on where they were.
Let's go back at it again. So I can't make sense of this totally, because if this was the knot and this is the one that came around his neck, and they tore it off of his neck, I think they would say that how was the noose removed from his neck? Did somebody cut it off? Was it torn off? Because if you're doing chest compressions, you're trying to revive the guy. If he has something tight on his neck, you're taking it off.
Yeah, that's
right?
True.
So if it was torn off, if this was the one, then you're right. There would be on what I would presume to be the right side, but can't be positive. But somewhere close to the front of this thing, there would have been a big old knot.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. But then this end should match wherever the other part was that was torn down, right?
Yeah, that's
all right.
Weird.
Let's carry on.
Yes.
Hey, there's a CPAP machine there. You know what that has? That has a cord.
Yeah, it does.
That has a big old cord on it.
Way easier.
Yeah.
Too.
If you're trying to hang yourself and you want to commit suicide and you're serious about it, that's what you would use. And by the way, who's on suicide watch is given a giant electrical cord?
I've never heard of that. I didn't know you had such a thing in a prison cell, honestly.
For
that exact reason,
Yeah. This is a little bizarre. But don't worry, bro. I read the file. And I actually think that cord is highly consistent with those marks that I'm seeing there.
Yeah, it does look
or
like
something
that,
a
doesn't it?
lot like that cord, highly consistent
Mm-hmm.
in terms of width and consistency across its aspect.
And with the cord, if it had happened to that, I mean, they would have been able to know just by looking at it.
Well, if you'd done any forensic investigation,
Yeah.
yes, you would be able to tell.
If it was like stretched out from the weight of it.
Yeah, I mean,
of a
working
human body
against
on it.
that being it, I don't see any obvious thing where it's been sort of like, gripped and twisted. Like it's quite violent to try and,
Oh, I bet.
garrote somebody, I would imagine.
I
So
bet.
I would imagine you would have to really get a good handhold on that thing and pull pretty hard. But fortunately, it has a handle right on it. It has a handle.
Crazy.
I don't know how this works. And I don't know what this further yellow thing is down in this
What's
corner.
that blue? Is that a glove?
That
over
is
it?
a glove, isn't
That's
it?
odd.
That's good. Yeah, what is that?
Looks kind of like a nitrile glove. I don't know.
Well, it does. Those are nitrile gloves, and this is a prison slipper. I don't know what that is, and I don't know what this yellow thing is. So anyway, that's all we got to work with. So
Extension cord.
I would just say that's a possibility. Okay. This is what they said was used. But here I want you to note something that there's those defibrillator pads there. And this is now on top of that. I don't know what those little wheels are, but I'm going to guess that's one of those gurneys, like they threw them up on something. But then somebody took a picture. So that noosey thing had to have been thrown down on after those defibrillator pads hit the ground. So somebody moved it. That's all I can tell you. Presumably after taking it off his neck. We don't know.
Right.
But here's a close-up picture of this is what's included in the autopsy report that 60 Minutes got. First off, we're going to note that this is a hemmed seam right here. So this wasn't cut and it wasn't ripped down. So remember, those are our two options for how the guard got him down.
That's
Either
true.
cut with a knife, scissors, I don't know, or ripped it down. But it wasn't this. This was not the noose based on that description.
Right.
Full stop. Can't have been.
It could have been part of whatever the noose allegedly was, but it wasn't the noose.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And by the way, Rockstar is absolutely correct.
Measuring tape.
Yeah, that's awesome forensicsness. This is right there. And it's probably closer to this.
Reno 911 forensic. Probably.
And MC, probably. Yeah.
The noose was created as a prop after the fact. You could be very right about that.
Yeah. Furthermore, we could go further, but this wasn't it. We know this wasn't it. And furthermore, if it was tied up and somehow they untied it, there's no knotting up here that would have been, because when you weight 198 pounds on this kind of material, you create a knot that creates marks.
Oh yeah.
That are impossible to remove again. Right.
I mean, we know as rock climbers, and if you fall on your knot,
yeah,
right,
good.
It's impossible to get it out.
Good luck getting that out.
And yeah, it would wrinkle the fabric there too.
Yep. Here's another picture of it. They took lots of pictures to try and establish that this was the noose, right? So just to complete the tour of the so-called crime scene, again, measuring tape, nicely done. There was this loop-de-loo around one of the rungs of the ladder that would get you to the upper bunk. Okay. And just for kicks, though, another anomaly that we haven't talked about was this.
The removal of Epstein's body from his cell was a violation of protocol, as the Bureau of Prisons, BOP, mandates that a suicide scene be treated with the same level of protection as any crime scene in which a death has occurred. Consequently, prison personnel also failed to photograph Epstein's body as it was found.
Yeah. Sure.
Right.
Okay. Yep. All right. So now let's listen in, because this is a before and after story.
Listen, that Jeffrey Epstein story is a big deal. Please do not let that story go. Keep your eye on this. Catherine Rumler, we need to keep the heat on this case, folks. There are a lot of people who are knee deep in the Washington swamp who are not telling you the truth about serious allegations out there that Epstein may have had video and audio of people out there doing things they shouldn't have been doing. And you should be asking yourself the question, how is it that all these people, the CIA director, the Obama fixer, Bill Clinton, all intersected paths with Jeffrey Epstein? Jeffrey Epstein isn't with us anymore, and nobody seems to want to talk about it. Outside of a few entrepreneurial media outlets saying, hey, this is a big deal.
He killed himself. You want me to get, I've seen the whole file. He killed himself.
What is editorially? What does DC do to you? Maybe we can explore some ideas around this next, but I just want to get through the whole case. Okay.
All right.
So there's another really important piece of evidence here that we just have to put in for completeness. It comes to us again from Michael Baden, who just speaks. When I hear him speak, I get calm because I'm like, oh, that's how it should sound when somebody's not being a moron.
Months since Jeffrey Epstein was found dead in his jail cell here in New York, and still many questions left unanswered. Famed pathologist Dr. Michael Baden, who was hired by Epstein's family to look into the autopsy, is revealing new details from the investigation and the examination, and he joins us live. Dr. Baden, good morning to you. You say that the answer to whether or not he killed himself could be in his eyes. Explain that.
That helps. That is with hanging. When the loop comes up under the windpipe, under the mandible, there usually is not any kind of hemorrhages in the eye. With homicidal strangulation, because of the increased pressure, there are hemorrhages in the eye.
And when you examined the body, there were burst capillaries.
There were burst capillaries in the eyes called petechiae, and that's not conclusive, but that's greater evidence of homicide than suicide.
When you hang yourself, what about your lower extremities?
When you hang yourself, the blood, the lividity, the blood settles down to the lower legs, and you get maroon discoloration in the front and back of the legs.
Turns purple.
Turns maroonish purple.
Okay.
Yes, maroonish purple.
And
this was not present here.
What color were they?
They were normal color, normal pale color.
So that's a big detail right there.
Ooh, yeah, that is.
Right?
That's weird.
That's not just weird. It's kind of disqualifying. So again, if you were going to say crime scene investigation, I'm trying to figure out, did this person actually commit suicide, hang themselves, or did their partner strangle them and then string them up and make it look like that? Well, if they've been dead for a significant amount of time, and then it takes time to figure out how to sort of hoist somebody up, it's going to be very hard to do. You might have to try it several times because there are these weak ass prison sheets. Then you tear one, so you try it again till you finally get them sort of propped. If he's been dead long enough, the lividity is going to settle differently. Right. And again, his ear was all like swollen and everything.
Yeah, that was strange.
Right.
It didn't even look like his ear, honestly.
I know.
It was just the angle.
Yeah,
at it from below or something. But
it was all bizarre. But so this is a picture of his legs. There's no lividity here whatsoever. None.
That's strange. Huh.
None. He did not die in an up down position. Is how I would look at that. There's potentially something going on. Sorry.
Behind his knee.
Behind here. So if the lividity is all settled on his backside, then he died on his back. And if you flipped over, if it was all settled on his front side, then he would have died on his front side.
So would it look like a bruise kind of?
It's I didn't get, these are fairly graphic photos if you get there, but yes, it looks maroonish.
Okay.
It just and it's splotchy too. It's not like a nice even, I've got a tan or something like that. Because again, this is just how blood settles due to gravity.
Right.
And your veins all give up the ghost and everything just sort of settles, right?
Falls,
and it's just gravity at that point. But there's just nothing going on there. So all right, tied around the top of the bunk, they told us. So I'm like, where? And if he tore it down, from where?
Shouldn't there be from that rung?
Shouldn't be a dangly piece? But no. But I mean, if he was hanging off of this, I can't imagine you could hang off of that and have your butt an inch off the ground unless you were hoisted tight up against that. But again, we should see, there should be something there, right?
Yeah,
again, I love, they got the measuring tape out. You can see the purple handle, like got the measuring tape.
I know. And why would, look at how they're measuring that. It goes all the way around the bunk to the other side.
Yeah. This is one of the slot. I mean, I can't believe this. Like, look at us investigating. We have a measuring tape. It's terrible.
And peaches or whatever's up there.
It-
Apples.
It's terrible. So, all right, and I just want to point out, I'm going to zoom in so that dangly piece all the way over, over there. You see, I'm way over here.
Yeah.
This does look torn potentially.
Mm-hmm.
So this is possibly a candidate for,
Where he was.
where he was torn off, and yeah. So maybe, I don't know. But again, we shouldn't be asking these questions. We shouldn't have to do this sort of post investigation. This ought to be very completely articulated, but it's
It
not.
should be.
Okay.
Mhm.
And as well, we also have to talk about the fact that on the front of his neck, stretching around to the right, we saw those two ligatures hanging around those two things. And also on the back side of his neck, on the right side only, you see this bruising right here.
Which is kind of consistent with how it's more heavy-handed on the right and the front.
Yeah, that would mean if you were really pulling, like, I can't guarantee how it happened, but I can guarantee you that more force was applied all the way around his right side and progressing all the way around his back. As well, this Garrett, or however he was strangled or however it happened, it came around like this, and then it had to progress across his back. This is inconsistent. If you have a slip knot, potentially, but we haven't seen a single slip knot here, where a slip knot would settle down tight.
Yeah.
All these other ones would make a triangular shape with the knot up here.
Oh, right. That makes sense.
Yep,
it would pull up towards wherever you were hanging from.
and this progresses all the way across. So you have to imagine the force is pulling hard this way,
Almost
right?
down.
Almost across the back, maybe even down a tiny bit.
And you can see, is that what you mean by the settling? Like, see how his back is right there?
Yep.
The blood settled as if he were on his back.
Again, you see all this. This is lividity up through here, and you see it especially on this side up here, as if he was down flat on the floor on his right side. That's what I would consider to be sort of consistent with that, compared to this side, where he'd be on his back, sort of, but with this side down. And that's why you see white on this side and red on this side. But what we don't know is, we don't know if these pictures are taken. I mean, presumably they're taken at the same time, because they're using this little, case locator and scale, right?
Right.
And they're just putting that around on the body. Presumably they're using the same camera as they're taking these pictures. So maybe these are contrast, comparable, right?
I mean, yeah. At this point, we don't even know that that's him necessarily.
Well, there would be that,
I don't trust
some
people.
DNA analysis. We don't,
I have issues.
Nobody has any trust, which is why, trust me, bro, ain't gonna cut it. Okay.
It's true. Yeah.
All right.
That's what Shauna said. Do we even trust that these are legit photos? No.
All caps, and that's fair. No, we really can't. So again, and then Patel said, a suicide when you see one, right? And Bongino said, I've seen the whole file. He killed himself. So I had to ask, is this the file? All right. So there was this other one we talked about earlier, this other knotted affair. And I have to ask, is it possible that in that match?
Kind of could be. Looks a little bit like that.
Right. The next question we would have to ask is, this is prison sheet material. I think you can see it tears relatively easily, right? It doesn't create big, long tears like you would have with like a solider material. Just it tears like it's designed to tear. The next question would be, how much force can you actually support? This is a fairly sharp bend to take. So knots are failure points on fishing and climbing and things like that. So that's a fairly sharp corner to have to take, including the inside of that hole looks reasonably sharp. So, and then this is broke. So the question is, could you even wait? And this would just be something you would say, oh, we found we could weight up to 290 pounds on these sheets.
See,
Who
that's
knew?
where Mythbusters comes in. I'm telling you.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. See, somebody else said that too. Again, thank you, Greg.
Mythbusters. Yes. Yeah. All right. So I don't know. I don't know. I'm just trying to guess, but none of this is consistent with tied, came in. This cord was tied around the top of the bunk, because that's just sloppy, because there is no place to tie on the top of the bunk, right?
Yeah.
Which we just looked at here.
It does not seem that way.
There is nowhere to tie to the top of the bunk.
Is it solid metal?
I believe it is.
It's not like it doesn't have any holes there.
No, if it had holes, it would have springs or something,
Yeah.
and those would be potential weapons.
It's true.
So in a prison system, I'm going to guess, but we don't have an actual picture, but just the way all this stuff is sort of perched on here, flat. I'm going to guess this is a big flat tray. So there really wasn't anywhere to tie around the top. So this is the only tie spot I can see, or this one, that makes any sense.
Maybe he was tied from multiple angles and places.
Could be. This could be a big BDSM thing we're looking at here. We don't know. All right. So this is from the Department of Justice had a report, and we saw it earlier, right, where we read about like how they found the thing. This is fascinating to me. So what do we have here, Evie?
This says the limited available video evidence. Says recorded video evidence for August 9th and 10th for the SHU area where Epstein was housed was only available from one prison security camera due to a malfunction, of course, of MCC's New York's digital video recorder system that occurred on July 29th, 2019. While the prison's cameras continued to provide live video feeds, recordings were made for only about half of the cameras. MCC New York personnel discovered this failure on August 9th, 2019.
August 8th.
Excuse me, August 8th. But it was not repaired until after Epstein's death. As detailed in this report, like many other BOP facilities, MCC New York had a history of security camera problems. And the available recorded video footage from the one SHU camera captured a large part of the common area of the SHU and portions of the stairways leading to the different SHU tiers, including Epstein's cell tier. Thus, anyone entering or attempting to enter Epstein's SHU tier from the SHU common area would have been picked up on that video camera or by that.
So the biggest mistake you can make in a crime scene investigation is making an assumption. So the assumption you see being made here is, oh, I know the cameras weren't working in his cell or anything, but there was a camera working that would have recorded somebody coming into that area from somewhere else. So we're making several assumptions. One, that the person had to come in from another area. It wasn't that there was another prisoner on that floor who was allowed to walk over the hallway. We have to make the assumption that it wasn't one of the prison guards who knocked out their other prison guard friend, with a roofie and then did it themselves. We have to also assume something else, which is even more foundational and fundamental here, which is that the video cameras were recording properly. So on that front, I just want to point out that Ehud Barak, the former PM of Israel, he founded a company called Toka. And technical documents reviewed by an ethical hacker prove that Toka's technology can alter both live and recorded video feeds, all without leaving any forensics or telltale signs of a hack.
Oh my God.
Right? Wow. It leaves no digital fingerprints. In theory, they say down there, such tech can be abused. One could imagine video being manipulated for whatever purposes. And oh, by the way, can I just point out that Ehud Barak, that guy seen leaving Epstein's he snuck into and out of Epstein's New York City brownstone all the time. That Ehud Barak, that one, just to be clear.
Whoa.
So the assumption that we can trust that the video feeds are exculpatory, you would have to very much get down into the weeds on this and do some exceedingly detailed forensics on the video to see if it had been hacked into or not. And by the way, it's very difficult. You can't, from what I understand, you can't even tell with Toka's technology whether you've been hacked into or not. This, we would have to trust that the people who are using a tape measure are the same people who are going to get this right. I just want to point that out there.
So he was going in there after he was found.
Oh, yeah.
For what reason?
You have to ask for what reason? Because there's young girls in there. He's a friend. He's what we can say is Epstein had, like Dan Bongino said, pre going into the administration, Epstein had this extraordinary clientele list, right?
Yeah.
This brownstone was given to him by Les Wexner, founder of Victoria's Secret. He was given tens, if not hundreds of millions by Les Wexner to manage, right? This is where all his wealth came from.
Yeah.
So he was as people do, they just give people brownstones worth, 8-9 figures, however much this one's worth.
I want one next.
Yes. At any rate, yes, that and obviously Ghislaine Maxwell, is of the daughter of Robert Maxwell, the very, very celebrated Mossad spy who is actually buried in Mount Olives, right? The Mount of Olives, because he was that important. Like very few people get buried there. He did, right? So, and of course, Ghislaine Maxwell's sister is currently head of technology for the WEF, right? So,
yikes.
I guess she fell black sheep of the family or carrying on the family tradition. You be the judge, right? All right.
Wow.
So this is the final conclusion of that report from the DOJ.
Okay. Finally, the medical examiner who performed the autopsy detailed for the Office of the Inspector General why Epstein's injuries were more consistent with and indicative of a suicide by hanging rather than a homicide by strangulation.
Now hold up right there. More consistent with and indicative of a suicide by hanging rather than homicide by strangulation. We have the lividities all wrong. We have the petechial hemorrhages, which is all wrong. We have the angle of the attack, which was all wrong. We have the lack of appropriate corresponding ligature marks. We have a bilateral unsymmetry of the wound patterns, more from the right than the left. All of this is highly, wildly inconsistent with suicide by hanging. The angle of the wound, the nature of the wound, that there's two wound patterns on the right, clearly. The lividity, the petechia. I mean, I just go on and on. It's just, it's all wrong. Plus, we have these unexplained contusions elsewhere on the body, all of that. Okay.
The medical examiner also cited the absence of debris under Epstein's fingernails, marks on his hands, contusions to his knuckles or bruises on his body, evidencing a struggle which would have been expected if Epstein's death had been a homicide by strangulation.
Yes, if he was fully, they didn't find any drugs or alcohol in his body, they said. So he wouldn't have been, I mean, that's an easy way to strangle somebody. Obviously, you drug them, then you strangle them.
Right. So they can't really fight back,
I guess. But it does raise another possibility. What if Epstein wanted to commit suicide? Let me split the difference. He wanted to commit suicide, and they said, we'd like that for you too. So they helped facilitate that. And so therefore you didn't put up any struggle.
Oh, interesting. Or maybe he
Just
had his mask on. You know, the crazy sleep
he had his apnea
machine, and they just cut off the flow of air.
and then strangulated him.
Marianne Norton says, oh, it was up there a little bit more, but that's okay.
Oh.
The postman, she was responding to somebody, but she says he had dirt on everyone who is anyone much bigger than Trump, and that's why Bongino let it go. And I would say that's probably true.
Yeah. So let's just review then. We have these open questions, right? You know, why don't the ligature marks match the supposed noose, right? That's a rookie mistake. Like the New York medical examiner said, consistent, and with even sketched badly the supposed noose, right? It doesn't even remotely match, not width, not forensic evidence. None of it matches. None of it. I mean, like grade school level reasoning is just like broken. How do we account for 3, maybe 4 neck fractures if there is a missing piece from the hyoid bone, like I suspect? Why wasn't standard suicide procedure followed at the MCC? Why was the suicide left up, designation left up to an ME, not a proper detective, right? Why wasn't there lower limb lividity and what about all these other contusions? So, I do want to point out very quickly now in the time we have left that, this is well known, medical legal aspects of asphyxia with reference to hanging. Okay. This is well studied. Okay. People study this all the time. So we don't have to read this abstract, but I'm just saying, look, how do you determine what's what? Okay. So this is the normal things that this is what it sounds like when non-insane people are conducting an actual investigation. All right.
A person may be murdered and the dead body suspended to simulate suicide. Look for signs of dragging to the place of suspension. When a dead body is suspended, the rope is usually tied first around the neck, then around the beam, branch of a tree, etc. The beam shows evidence of the rope having moved from below upwards as the body has been pulled up. In true suicidal hanging, the rope moves from above downwards. Further, fibers from the rope may be found on the hands of the victim in suicidal hanging, but not in case of post-mortem hanging. The rope should be examined for presence or absence of any paint similar to the one on the beam.
And it goes on and on from there, right? It's just like, okay, here are the things you have to sort of look at. You look at carefully which way is the rope moving. It's all that, right? But that's what it sounds like when normal people.
That's science right there, right?
Yeah.
Observation.
Yeah. Normal investigative science sounds, that's what it sounds like, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've seen the file is not science. Okay.
You know a suicide when you see one.
You know one when you see one is not this. This is a totally different thing. But this is the important part from this review article. They said that in yellow.
In case of strangulation, the ligature mark in the neck will be continuous, circular, and at or below the thyroid cartilage. Injuries to the skin, muscle, and deeper tissues, fracture of the hyoid bone, and laryngeal cartilage are common.
Oh.
In case of strangulation.
In case of strangulation, the ligature mark will be continuous, circular, and at or below the thyroid cartilage.
There it is.
Fractures of the bones are common. So this is actually where you would start seeing the particulars of this case.
Mm-hmm.
The angle of the ligature mark, the fact that there were 2 ligature marks clearly on the right side, that we have a bruise on the back right side of the neck, the fractures, the various fractures, all of that is highly consistent. And this is just normal stuff, right? Anybody who's been around homicide investigations where strangulations happened, particularly with a garrote, meaning a wire of some kind or a thin rope, that this is where you would start. Yeah.
And based on what our government does, the FBI, et cetera, the CIA, I wouldn't put it past them to do something weird here. Right?
Yep.
We kill people, we unalive people in other governments.
Yep.
When we want to change the regime that they have. So believe me, we could pull it off if we really wanted to.
Yeah. So I just wanted to get all this out in the open. And let me just say here. So look, what are the conclusions? First, the New York Medical Examiner made a huge error, if we can call it that, in ruling Epstein's wounds consistent with suicide. Huge error. Just like rookie mistakes, like fire them from their jobs. Don't let them ever be involved in a crime scene investigation until they take remedial forensic education. And second, Epstein's wounds are most consistent with a strangulation or homicide, as we've established here. I hope you'll agree with that. And that the story was covered up under Trump 1. Remember, Bill Barr under Trump 1 said, oh, it was a suicide. And then under Biden, or I have to put that in quotes because we don't know who was running the White House. That's a whole other story for another day. But it was covered up under Biden and now again under Trump 2. So all I can tell you is that it's preposterous to think that that we're going to be satisfied with a suicide when you see one. And I've seen the file. And just to round this out, I found this hysterical. We're going to close with this today. Let's listen in on Tucker and Sean.
I feel like an idiot for being shocked because...
Excuse me, way too loud. Let me dial that back 1 second. Just about blew my left eardrum out here. Not all these video files have the same.
Of course it's not a democracy. Of course the system is rigged. It's fake. Because no matter who gets elected, you get the same foreign policy, you get the same economic policy, and the Epstein videos remain secret. So like that just shows you that our system has no effect on the actual system.
Wait, what are you talking about? I thought we could all sleep well at night now knowing that Epstein legitimately killed himself, right?
What was that?
Did that just come out?
It's just 2 guys that I really like. I mean, I love Bongino, but he's a friend of mine. But you weren't convinced by that?
No.
Why?
I mean, I've dug into that, and it's just so spooky what's going on with that, and how nobody. I mean, how do you charge a guy with sex trafficking when there's no end users that have been charged? Who did he traffic to?
Well, that's a great question. I don't know. You got me on that one.
I mean, right? How do you charge him with that if there's no? I mean, if that's where the trail starts, where does it end? We haven't. So, I think there's just a lot more going on than the majority of people know about.
What do you think that was?
What do I think it was?
Yeah.
I think it was a blackmail operation. What do you think it was?
I think it was a blackmail operation run by the CIA and the Israeli intel services and probably others. French intelligence always has a hand in everything, I've noticed. So probably them too, but the usual, darkest forces in the world colluding to make rich and powerful people obey their agenda.
I mean, look, though, I don't understand why nobody has come out on it. Nobody has come out on it, right? I mean, because if you paint the scenario, I mean, you get on a jet, maybe you're totally innocent. You don't know what's going on. Two hot women come out of the whatever stewardess place, come out, and one thing leads to another.
Yes.
I mean, and then what happens? They go, "Oh, we got you. You're on camera. And by the way, these girls are 15 or 16 or whatever the hell they were, right?" And, but I mean, yes. If you're a married guy, it's pretty fucked up that you're doing that. But I mean, it's nothing new under the sun. So why wouldn't you just scream blackmail at the top of your lungs? Like, I didn't know this is what happened, and just come clean on it.
Why do you think?
Because they're repeat customers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because they're so deeply implicated that they can't actually get out of it.
Yeah, maybe not. I don't know.
I mean, there's also.
I think that's accurate. I think that's right. And so, when we consider the totality of the evidence here, I don't know what Cash and Dan are up to. Either on one end, they completely honestly believe that this was just a suicide and they have access to information that they are, for whatever reason, not able to share with us, right? Because we don't have access to any of that information in the file that would suggest anything other than a homicidal strangulation. That's where the evidence leads currently. On the other end of the spectrum, they're lying and they know it, right? And so then we have to speculate, well, what could be so powerful that would cause them to completely repudiate who they were on the campaign trail before they came into power? What happens when you go into Washington, D.C. that's so potent that you just completely shift who you are from a moral integrity and ethical standpoint, right? And then now we have to begin to speculate, what could those things be that are so vexing that just nobody comes clean, like they said, like everybody just sort of falls in line with like the stupid narrative. So I don't know what the answers are to all of that yet. But that's all the speculative side. But I can tell you that we are very convinced on this side of things that this is a homicidal strangulation until we get better evidence or something that really comports with the data we have. All right. Mm-hmm. So I think we're coming into the end here, Evie.
Sounds good. I was just going to see if you could go down in the comments, see if there's anything else. There's always such good stuff. We do read your comments. If we don't get to them on air, we do look at them after the show is over. So we welcome people's thoughts and ideas about what they think is happening. And also, please like and subscribe if you have enjoyed this video. I think that's what gives the algorithm some movement in getting this up there so more individuals can see it. So thank you for doing that.
Good.
And I wanted to read something by a woman named Clarissa Pincola Estes, and she caught my eye many years ago. She wrote a book called Women Who Run with the Wolves, which is incredibly good. She is a really great writer, and she happened to make, I think she might have gone a little, well, we all went in different pathways during COVID, but she wrote this in 2017, and I think it applies then as now. She says, "My friends, do not lose heart. We were made for these times. I've heard from so many recently who are deeply and properly bewildered. They are concerned about the state of affairs in our world now. Ours is a time of almost daily astonishment and often righteous rage over the latest degradations of what matters most to civilized, visionary people." And I'm going to skip to the end. One of the most calming and powerful actions you can do to intervene in a stormy world is to stand up and show your soul. Soul on deck shines like gold in dark times. The light of the soul throws sparks, can send up flares, builds signal fires, causes proper matters to catch fire. To display the lantern of soul in shadowy times like these, to be fierce and to show mercy toward others, both are acts of immense bravery and greatest necessity. Struggling souls catch light from other souls who are fully lit and willing to show it. If you would help to calm the tumult, this is one of the strongest things you can do. There will be times when you feel discouraged. I too have felt despair many times in my life, but but I do not keep a chair for it. I will not entertain it. It is not allowed to eat from my plate. The reason is this. In my uttermost bones, I know something, as do you. It is that there can be no despair when you remember why you came to earth, who you serve, and who sent you here. The good words we say and the good deeds we do are not ours. They are the words and deeds of the one who brought us here. In that spirit, I hope you will write this on your wall. When a great ship is in harbor and moored, it is safe. There can be no doubt. But that is not what great ships are built for.
Thank you. And thanks everyone for being here at the Signal Hour. We will be back on Wednesday, not Friday this week, because I'm busy doing a lot of work with my crash course, which is getting redone, and also another huge body of work. So Signal Hours are now Wednesdays again. So thanks very much for being here. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Hope you got something from it. Again, share it, like it, and consider coming to Peak Prosperity to become a subscriber if you like content like this. We do this all week long at Peak Prosperity. So with that, thanks much.
Thanks, everybody. Blessings to you.